सफदर भाई,
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अलिफ लाम
रज़ा अंकल आप म्यूट हुए हुए
मैं म्यूट हुआ हूँ
जी।
एक मिनट। अच्छा, आवाज बंद थी मेरी, दोबारा
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अलिफ लाम मीम ज़ालिकल किताबु ला रैब फीह हुदल लिलमुत्तक़ीन الذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون صدق الله العلي العظيم
माशाअल्लाह, जज़ाकल्लाह। इमाम ज़माना मिलकर सलावत अल्लाहुम्मा
अला मोहम्मद व आले
ए रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, भाई से दमे सुबह बिछड़ जाएगी ज़ैना। ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, सोने दे सकीना को के फिर सो न सकेगी, रोना भी जो चाहेगी तो फिर रो न सकेगी, असगर से मुलाकात तो फिर हो न सकेगी, ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, घबराए हुए लाल है सहमी हुई माए, जी भर के मैं दे लूं अली अकबर को दुआएं, लेना है अभी ओनो मोहम्मद की बलाएं, ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, बाकी है अभी आले मोहम्मद का सफीना, बेटी को सुलाने को है शबीर का सीना, झूला अली असगर का झुलाती है सकीना, ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, कल कौन सुनेगा ये मेरी आहे बुका भी, होगा तहे खंजर मेरे भाई का गला भी, खेमा तो कुजा सर पे ना होगी ये रेदा भी, ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, ऐ रात घड़ी भर को तो रहने दे सुकून में, घिर जाएंगे नासिर मेरे आदा की सफों में, ये चांद से चेहरे तो नहा जाएंगे खून में, ऐ रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैना, ऐ रात बिखर जा तेरे बस में है जहां तक, मिट जाएंगे कल आले पैगंबर के निशान तक, बाकी है ये मंजर अली अकबर की अज़ां तक, ए रात न ढलना के उजड़ जाएगी ज़ैनब। सलावत। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद
मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व
व आले मोहम्मद व अज्जिल फरज।
कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। शय को एक चांद छुपाने में, शय को एक चांद छुपाने में बहुत देर लगी। हाय कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। कुछ कदम दूर है बाजार से दरबार, मगर कुछ कदम दूर है बाजार से दरबार, मगर फिर भी शहजादी को आने में बहुत देर लगी। हाय कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। शय ने हर लाश को जल्दी से उठाया, लेकिन शय ने हर लाश को जल्दी से उठाया, लेकिन लाशे अकबर को उठाने में बहुत देर लगी। हाय कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। टुकड़े चुनते हुए कासिम के कहा मौला ने, टुकड़े चुनते हुए कासिम के कहा मौला ने, हाय अफसोस के आने में, हाय अफसोस के आने में बहुत देर लगी। हाय कब्र असग़र की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी।
इस कदर प्यास से सूखा था गुलुए सरवर, इस कदर प्यास से सूखा था गुलुए सरवर, शिम्र को तेग चलाने में, शिम्र को तेग चलाने में बहुत देर लगी, हाय कब्र असगर की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी। शह ने शह को एक चांद छुपाने में, शह को एक चांद छुपाने में बहुत देर लगी, हाय कब्र असगर की बनाने में बहुत देर लगी।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله وعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كان الناس أمة واحدة صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. The Quranic concept of one nation has been our ongoing topic. Tonight is lecture number 9. Our discussion up until now on this idea, this very important, deep-rooted concept of one nation from the 213th verse of Surah Baqarah has been to somehow understand what does Allah mean by one nation. And we have looked at a lot of discussions in the past 8 to 9 nights, and with the attempt to understand that, at one moment, how were we as a group and how we've become and how we need to be. So we talked about the idea that in the tafsir of this verse, Allama Tabatabai rahmatullah alayh in Al-Mizan talks about the fact that a human being with his knowledge now understood that part of the knowledge of the insan was that they understood that they have to preserve themselves. And the insan has to use every tool outside of it to preserve itself. Okay? So animate, inanimate, and then ultimately humans as well. That everybody has a role to play in my preservation, in my perfection, in my journey towards God Himself. The problem with that occurred is that, of course, because there are evil elements inside the human being, and now those evil elements were chosen by the human being now to actualize, of course they began to exploit, abuse, and corrupt the individuals around them. So when the insan realize that this insan or this person or that person is dependent on me for, let's say, whatever the case may be, they use that moment to do what? To abuse them, to break the law, to of course strip them of their rights and be unjust towards them. And thus what was once one nation now becomes into slowly small fragments, which leads us to today. And we talked about the idea that what are those concepts that have caused us to become this way? And we talked about elitism, right? We talked about the idea of individualism and how it's important that we understand. And last night we spoke a little bit about the idea of knowledge. Because one thing that Allama mentioned in tafsir that I found to be very interesting was that he says it was the knowledge. As knowledge grew, that knowledge actually turned the human being into somebody who was judging others, looking down on others, used it to actually believe that he or she was higher than the person. And so if you have power over somebody, then what? Then you have the ability to do what? To do dhulm and injustice to that individual. And of course, that's what happened. But it's interesting to note that usually we think that knowledge is a virtue, right? It's a positive thing, right? We're always told, seek knowledge, seek knowledge, seek knowledge, but I don't think we understand what Islam says and how to handle that knowledge and what to do with that knowledge. And that's why I found, at least, and albeit it might have been a dry discussion, it was crucial, man, to understand that it's not just about knowledge. In fact, that same knowledge, as we've seen in the past, can become a veil of justice, a veil of harmony, a veil of upholding the rights of everybody else around us. That same knowledge that should have elevated you actually, turned you into an animal inside of your internal kingdom. So we talked about the idea of the importance of purification, and then of course, ta'lim, education, right? وَيُزَكِّهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, like I said yesterday in Surah Jum'ah, that the role of the Prophet was to purify, and then educate. Why? Because that knowledge, with that purification, that knowledge becomes an avenue for you what? To become humble. Right? To become humble. And without that knowledge can actually be an avenue where it becomes a veil for you. That was all yesterday. Now tonight, I want to speak about a very important topic to me, one that is very near and dear to me, and one that I really think is not talked about enough. I apologize. See, if you were right now in front of me, I ask for a salawat, but you're not in front of me, so it becomes challenging to talk to an empty room and a camera, but what can I do? This is the zaman that we're in right now. I'm going to connect this topic into our major topic of One Nation. I'm not off my topic. I will do my best not to steer off my topic. I do my best not to steer off the topic. But one area of this idea of a collective system. Remember, in our first initial discussions, we talked about the importance of collectivism, right? That everything now in this universe plays a role for my perfection, okay? That only happens when I believe in the collective, when I want to invest in the collective, when I believe in the greater community. Okay? That's not a given. We can't assume that individuals are running towards the centers. In fact, in my conversations, and I've mentioned this before, is that when things get back to normal and the centers reopen their doors, people now can come in at full capacity, there's not a guarantee that, especially my youth, are going to be, rushing to get back. And there's several reasons for it. Number one, of course, is convenience. I'm sitting in my home, I'm getting all the knowledge with all of those inconveniences out of the way. One reason that really got to me, and this was a talk I had yesterday with a youth. And if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to grab some water. So 1 second, I'm sorry. I have something stuck in my throat. Give me 1 second, please. So one discussion is, of course, the idea of convenience. That they've really bought into the virtual masjid idea since the pandemic hit. But a deeper and a more disturbing reason, and it's a topic that I just don't think is talked about enough, is there seems to be a high level of judgment inside of our communities, inside of ourselves, inside of our families. And here I am, the entire Ashra, talking about one nation, right? Believe in the collective, right? Invest in the collective now. You're not an individual. This is not a me-centric, it's a God-centric society. You belong to a jama'ah, all these things, everything I talked about. But when that jama'ah and that collective doesn't allow a person to flourish, clips their wings, makes them feel insufficient, then they're not going to believe in the collective. So part of the solution, or part of the process of building this atmosphere of one nation, where we all understand that each of us have a role to play. Remember, every experience, every individual, every encounter, anything you experience in this world, all adds to your perfection. I really want all of you to understand that. The same way that, for example, if the perfection of a rock is the fact that it becomes a jewel, like where is a pebble on the beach and where is a ruby in the hand? A ruby, a diamond, whatever the case, right? The pebble on the beach has no value. A diamond, ooh, it's a diamond, right? That diamond has reached its perfection within the world of the rocks. But that diamond can only reach its perfection when it's mined properly. And the zameen does its job, and the earth does its job, and the miner does their job. Meaning the perfection of the rock, of the diamond now, is dependent on the system around them. The perfection of the fruit, of any fruit, is that it reaches its sweetness, right? Whereas, let's say, for example, sour grapes, where are sweet peaches, right? But the sweetness of the fruit is dependent completely on the farmer, on the soil, on the water, on the sun, right? On the wisdom of the farmer when to pluck it. Meaning, its perfection cannot be achieved without the collective. We're no different. Our perfection to God cannot be achieved without every single encounter. Sour or sweet, horrible or beautiful, devastating or encouraging. So I ask all of you guys, many of my elders out there who have experienced, let's say, heart-wrenching experiences. Maybe you've had horrible encounters. Maybe you've had full-fledged arguments, fights, shouting matches with people in your community, in your family, with your in-laws, I don't know, with your friends. Even that encounter, as sour tasting as it is, as it was, it adds to your perfection. We cannot reach perfection without each other. And it's not just each other human being, it's everything. The sun helps us, the rain helps us, the animal helps us, the rock, the trees, the fruits. Every system in this idea, in this cosmos, helps each other reach that perfection. Okay? So one would think that we would embrace this collectivism, right? That if I want to reach at the highest peak and highest level, I am dependent on you guys, so I'm going to go ahead and invest in that. The problem is that when we don't feel like we're being accepted by that jama'ah, by that collective. When there's judgment inside the home, for example. When our parents say words of judgment to our children. When our husbands say words of judgment to our wives. When the elders say words of judgment to our youth. When the youth say words of judgment to each other. Right? So this judgment that I'm going to say 10,000 times tonight is a huge issue in our communities. And one of the factors that needs to be there for the building of one nation is the removal of judgment. So with your permission, I want to speak tonight about judgment. It is something that's very near and dear to me. Because it affects us directly. And it is a utmost important topic. And one that I just don't think has, it doesn't get enough airtime. And there's a lot of youth that simply don't step foot anywhere, not in social gatherings, not in the mosque, not in family gatherings, not out of their room inside of their house, all because of a fear of judgment. They don't open their mouth for the fear of being ridiculed. They don't wear certain colors or clothes out of fear of ridiculing. They don't come downstairs out of fear of someone saying, you look like this, you look like that. Right? And I'm not here to judge the sensitivity of them and brother hassas him, Malana, and no. That's not what I'm saying. And inshallah later on, we'll get to the idea that we don't get to dictate what makes them feel like they're being judged. Or any of us. Any of us. Okay, God knows I had my fair share of judgment, and we learned to have thick skin. We learned to talk ourselves out of it. It still hurts. I mean, all of my lectures sometimes, as much as I get encouraging messages, I get hate mail. I get savage messages. People calling me all sorts of names on my WhatsApp, in my inbox. Oh yes, calling my family members, complaining to them about me. It happens all the time. Right? And it's all part of the package. So you really have to have a thick skin, especially in this day and age where it seems as if there's so many avenues to express how you feel about somebody. It no longer has to be face-to-face. Back then when I was younger, half the things weren't said because people didn't have the courage to come to your face and say it. Now, you can hide behind a WhatsApp message. You can hide behind a social media post. You can, you can be, you can do gaslighting. You can have the hashtag. You can be, these what's that word I'm looking for? Passive-aggressive comments, right? Nowadays, even one emoji says everything. It's so easy now. So I want to speak on judgment. And my premise is that we don't have any right to judge anybody. We don't. It doesn't mean that we ignore everything. So there's a fine balance, and I'll attempt tonight to get to my balance. And if I don't, Allah please forgive me, and all of you please forgive me as well. I want to start off with a story. It's one of the most effective stories. It's one of those stories that I have been affected by, okay? And if I seem over emotional tonight, it's only because this is a very near and dear topic to me, and I chose this portion of the Ashra to talk about this, okay? I've been talking about, one nation, one group, one Jamaat, and people are like, I don't want to be part of the Jamaat if they're going to sit there and make me feel like I'm always deficient in my worship, in the way that I look, in the fact that I don't have a kid fast enough. Why aren't you married? Why aren't you losing weight? And, why are you doing this? And why'd you start hijab? And why aren't you wearing hijab? And, and it's just like, you know what? No, thank you. I'm good where I am, Mom. Don't ask me to go there. I'm okay where I am. I don't want to go. So now there's all sorts of stuff, right? There's shame, there's isolation, there's mental health issues, there's anxiety, there's stress, there's depression, there's suicide, there's a low self-esteem, low self-confidence. All of that comes from a very judgy collective group. Now, let's tackle this logically, slowly, bit by bit. I want to start off with this story. The first time I heard this story was several years ago. I share it whenever I can. It touches me. It gives me goosebumps. It makes me emotional. Only because it speaks volumes. And I humbly ask any of you out there, and I have been doing this in this Ashra, I don't know why, I feel like this Ashra we need to heal. I've used that word everywhere I've gone in this Muharram. We need to heal. There's a lot of pain in our communities, a lot of pain in our families, a lot of pain inside of our hearts. We hide them, we camouflage them, we disguise them with smiles. We don't want to sit there and burden somebody with their own pain. I don't want to come across like I'm in pain. But when certain things are triggered, then you understand just how deep wounded that wound is. Right? And sometimes, if we've been hurt, and God knows everyone's been hurt, we're not looking for someone to come and heal my wound. I just want you to acknowledge that there's a wound there. Don't stab me in the back and then complain that I then get upset because I complain about the pain of the wound. Right? If you understood the wound, you'd understand my pain. Okay? So I need to calm down a little bit right now and send myself a salawat and begin. Inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. The story is of a student in the Hawza who wanted to go to Najaf. I'm sure some of you have already heard the story before. And he wanted to go to Najaf, and his teacher said, you may go to Najaf, no problem. And he was a student in the Hawza. Didn't have much money. Everything was his books. So he decided to join a qafila that was already going to Najaf for ziyarat from Iran, from Qom. To a true story, by the way, to get to Najaf. And from Najaf, he'll figure things out. The story is the qafila now is on its way to Najaf, and they decide one night to stop and get some rest. And back then there were long journeys, right? It wasn't one flight or So they got settled in, they pitched up their tents, and they began to settle in for the night. What was a custom back then, and maybe even now, is that there would be certain looters and robbers that would wait for caravans to come between Iran and Iraq, and when they would settle in between Iran and Iraq, they would rob them. So lo and behold, this young man now is in his qafla, ready to go to sleep, and they, of course, get looted and robbed by these robbers. Okay, they announced to the entire qafla to empty out all your belongings and put them in the middle, right here, as one big pile. All this kid had were his books. So he goes, fine, puts his books there. When they're done collecting everything, Buddy Himmat, with a lot of himmat, he goes to this young student, goes to the main robber and says, look, in your pile of things you're going to take are my books. They're old, they're ripped, they have my notes in them, they have zero value for you, but they're everything to me. If it's okay, I want my books back. The robber says that in the distance now, he's talking to the young man. See that in the distance now, you'll see a hill. On the hill is a light. Under that light is my boss. Go and ask him. If he says that you can have the books, you can have the books. Okay? Middle of the night now. He goes, finds the light, finds the hill. He goes on the hill. He sees a man there praying, namaz Shab, Salatul Layl. He waits until he's finished. He's confused. Paraphrasing here, I don't know if I had the right person or not, but we were just robbed as a group, and the robbers took everything from us, including my books. I had asked for my books to be given back to me, and I was directed here and told that I would find the mastermind behind this looting business. He says, yes, that's me. Even more confused, he said, I just want my books back. So the boss summons one of his employees, says, give him his books back. He grabs his books, but then he doesn't leave. He has to ask him. He's got to ask him what you and I are thinking right now. Can I ask you a question? You're praying namaz Ashra? He goes, yes, I am. But yet you're robbing the potential zawad of Imam Ali in Najaf. He goes, yes, yeah, I am. He said, is this like what is this? The boss says to the young man that this is the only thing that I do for God. Everything else I do for myself. The young man says, okay, walked away. Arrived in Najaf a few days later. One day during his Najaf trip, he goes to the Haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen for ziyarat. And during that ziyarah trip, he hears a man who is crying, quite emotionally crying. He looks over to the side of the dhari and he recognizes this man to be the same boss that had given me my books back when I was first traveling from Qom to Najaf. He approached him. He says, do you remember me? He's like, no, I don't. He says, I was the kid that you gave the books back. He goes, oh, yes. He says, what are you doing here? He looked at him with tears rolling down his face, and he said, it was your question. It was Sawal al-Shama. It was your question. Your question you asked me, that how could you loot the zawad of Amir al-Mu'mineen and pray namaz Shab? I've come here to beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. So I'm going through the dhari of Amir al-Mu'mineen to get to Allah. The point is that we don't know the halat and the inner state of any of us. We don't know. And one thing that I really want to mention tonight, and this will be a little bit of a different speech than you're used to, and I'm sorry, is that, if you're somebody who has spent your entire life being judged, and you're listening to my speech right now, and you're somebody who has been judged on the way that you look, and the color of your skin, and your height, and I don't know, your accent and your build and anything to do with your judgment. And that has caused you to have a low self-esteem. That's caused you to not believe in yourself. That's caused you now to isolate yourself from everybody else. I just want to say, I'm sorry. I want to offer my apology. I want you to begin healing. I'm trying to heal everyone else in this Muharram, and in the process heal myself as well. It's not fun to have people look at you and assume you're a certain way just because of what the limited eyes see. It's not fun to not, for someone to not understand the damage they cause by when they ask me that, you've gained 10 pounds. Like, why are you spending so much time in the sun? You look dark. No one's going to marry you if you continue this way. On the outside, this man was a boss of a looting and a criminal and a stealing ring. A ring of thieves. He ran a ring of thieves. But on the inside, there were moments of ma'arifat that would shine in through the namaz and shab. And finally, those little pokes cause an explosion. Janab bin Hurr had moments of ma'arifat. And you would see it throughout history. I mentioned in the Masayib, I believe, that when Imam Hussein said that very, very, very harsh statement to Janab bin Hurr, that may your mother grieve over you. The shine, one little poke, one little ray of ma'arifat. Janab bin Hurr looks to Imam Hussein and says, Aba Abdullah. He would call him Aba Abdullah. If your mother was anybody else, I would have responded to you. Your mother is Fatima. On the outside, you would judge this man to be that person who caused a lot of pain to Imam Hussein. But when he came to Imam Hussein saw him as a light of ma'arifat. We don't know everyone's story. We don't know everyone's journey. We don't know how everyone sees themselves. And sometimes they walk into that masjid, they walk into that building, they come downstairs for dinner, they go to a family gathering with the hopes that maybe this event, this gathering, these people will help me, solve my own self-esteem issues. If you see me as someone who's gotten darker and heavier, and I'm not worthy of being married, to, if you see that about me, you don't think I see that about myself? Why is it that somebody doesn't want to hear anybody else come and tell me what my faults are? I know what my faults are. I know what I have to do. Don't tell me that. Because all the person is doing is reconfirming what they know already. When somebody comes and tells me or asks me, why aren't you pregnant yet? Why don't you have a child yet? Does she have any idea that we have been praying day in and day out with tears falling down our face that Allah, please, are we not worthy of a child? Every test possible, every hospital possible, every dua amal possible, every tear I have, my tears I've dried up. And I walk into, let's say, for example, a center, maybe Thursday night, hopefully Dua Kamel will give me that barakat. Along comes someone and says, you're not pregnant yet? What's wrong with you? Hurry up. It's only about your career and all this kind of stuff. Ye sab fuzul ke baatein hain. And she's crushed. With himmat she walked into the center. Didn't want to face anybody else. It's been a tough 6 months trying to have a child. Because when a woman tries to have a child and she's not able to get pregnant, she sees it as a deficiency inside of her. She apologizes to her husband sometimes. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you a child. You know how hard that is? We can't get that as men. And to see that judgment, it's one example. See that judgment from other fellow women who have been through the same process is devastating. But we can't read the pain inside of her heart because we can't see the heart. All this kid asked was, you pray and yet you loot. That was enough for him to say, you know what, I'm done. Anybody else would judge him as a criminal, as a thief, as a zero, as a nobody. I'm not condoning him stealing, of course not. But you just don't know. You don't know. And if you don't know, no one has any right to judge. Now, let's try not to make this into an emotional majlis tonight, okay? Let's try to have some content here, okay? I'm not going to make it into a heart-filled majlis because, you're not here for my heart. You're here to learn from the deen. Up and down the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Day of Judgment. Okay? Yawm al-Fasl, Yawm yub'athun, Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Din. Right? All these different words that we have, but all of them have this connotation of what? Of judgment. Yawm al-Fasl, the day that what? The day that people will be separated. The separation happens when you have a judgment, good and bad. The day that they'll rise, yub'athun, they'll rise. In what state will they rise? There's a judgment there. Maliki yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment, sometimes in English translation. So we're okay with being judged. We're okay with judgment. We all believe in the day of judgment. We have no problem. I've yet to hear anyone tell me, how could there be a day of judgment? What is this judgment? No, we're okay with the judgment. The conversation is, where is the judgment coming from? Right? Comes from Allah, we're readily accepting the judgment from Allah as opposed to some auntie or uncle or youth or person or my mother or my father or my sibling beside me. That is a little bit tough to swallow and digest and hazm. God is easier to digest and hazm. Okay? That's first point. It's not the issue of judgment, it's the issue of the source of the judgment. Point number two is that we have a whole concept of Amr bil Ma'ruf. Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar is the idea, it's ultimately a judgment call. I have to judge if this person is going down the path of evil or judge if this person should be encouraged. Right? So I have to judge their actions and look at what they're doing. But it's a wajibat, Sayyid. Are you asking me not to judge people? The deen is saying to judge. But what we fail to understand and what we forget is that even certain wajibats are shuruti. They're conditional. The only way that you can say a word to anybody about what they're doing is if you have their ear, meaning that you know them very well. You know them very well, meaning what? That they don't see your words as judgment. Like after my speech, right? If my wife and I discuss my speech, and for example, she says, it seemed like this point didn't make sense or it wasn't explained properly, that's not her judging me as a speaker, that's her helping me perfect the craft. But that only happens because it's a trusted source, right? If it's not a trusted source, if the person, or for example, somebody comes in and says, why don't you wear hijab, or why don't you do this, or have a beard, and blah, 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 and if it's, for example, your best friend, or your father, or your sibling, or I don't know, let's say, your cousin that you trust very well, you'll take that. Some random person in the community, you're like, yo, back off. What they're saying is good, but it has an aura and a boo of judgment, and we run from judgment. On top of that, and a bigger conversation is everyone's journey to Allah is everyone's journey to Allah. My fear in this One Nation discussion that I really racked my brain over should I not, was the idea that we thought, people would think by me saying Ummatul Wahida, is that we're all just one big existence. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we have our own respective paths, but use the entities around us to perfect our own personal path, but embrace our own personal path. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says that worship Allah to the best of your ability. The best of your ability. Who knows my ability? Who knows my anduruni batin? Who knows my batin? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, let's be fair now. Let's be balanced here, okay? One thing that I want to mention to my youth, especially who are out there saying, yeah, so I preach. Hold on now. Hold on. You won't like me in about 5 minutes. There's certain slogans right now, certain hashtags right now, certain kind of, lingo that's used today in today's day and age, in 2020, that I think sometimes we don't understand what that means, okay? I'll give you an example. The one that drives me crazy, drives me insane is that be real, bro. Be true to yourself, bro. Okay? Be real. Be real. I'm real, man. He's real, man. Wow. I gotta be real, man. Be true to yourself, bro, man. You do you, bro. You do you. When people say that, I just wanna, I don't want to like hit anyone else's head. I just want to take my head and ram it into the wall as fast as I can. Find the hardest wall possible and run as fast as I can head first. I swear to God. Because we'll take it to mean this. Somebody comes to you and says, you know what, you get angry a lot. And when you get angry, you have no filter. Right? Your Zaman and your tongue goes out of control. You say whatever you want in any language that you want, using obscene language, yelling and screaming, right? The walls are shaking. You don't care. If you're angry, you won't hold back. It's not good, man. You should do your best to control your anger. We all get angry. It doesn't give you the right to go ahead and, And what do you say? Yo, man, I'm being true to myself. This is who I am. I got to be real. I can't be fake. I can't be hypocrite. That's not what that means. It's a horrible interpretation. That's not exactly a good thing. Sometimes you can't be yourself. Sometimes the self is a satanic reality inside of us. It's the very self that Allah says to fight. Meanwhile, today's lingo, today's R&B hip-hop artist, today's hashtag, today's IG post is, be true to yourself. You're like, oh my God, that's beautiful. Yes, I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going to be true to myself. Forward, and guys, look, and okay. What if that self is animalistic? What if that self is what if that self is destructive? Be true to yourself? No. So let's be careful of the idea of you do you, bro. Right? You only live once, right? It's all about hashtag YOLO. And the problem with that is, I said it many times, I'll say it again because it keeps happening. We're not quite there yet. Is the fact that this idea that I can be whoever I want to be is a very, very me-centric concept. And I talked about that already. I don't want to go down that route. But the me-centric idea is that if it's okay with me, it shouldn't matter to anybody else. And that's not the case at all. So if one side of the fact is the idea that others shouldn't judge me, the other side is that it doesn't give you the right to be any way you want to be. If somebody comes to you and calls you out for your behavior, don't say, yo, man, you're judging me. No, they're fixing you. They're elevating you. Provided you don't abide by the horrendous idea that you do you. You do you is a prescription that says basically, you know what? I want animalistic freedom. I want complete and total freedom. And that type of freedom doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Freedom stops when we begin to either hurt somebody or commit a crime or, trample on someone's rights. That's where our freedom stops. Okay, so doing something, for example, having absolute freedom where I have no consequences, I have no repercussions, there's no hisab kitab, there's no accountability, all that's all built within YOLO, you do you. Even if it is the most absurd thing, turn off your intellect, turn off your aql, go into the instinctive being, pull out the animal inside of you, and become the animal that you want. Right? If I, for example, have a bucket list when I was 18 that I was dying to, let's say, check off, and I couldn't, now that I'm 42 years old, and I'm married, and I've done everything for my kids and my in-laws and my husband and my wife, and now I still have that bucket list, I want to go ahead and check off that bucket list. So get a tattoo, jump off of a plane, for example, I don't know, do all these things. Okay, bro, man. And you call your friend, yo, I have a bucket list. Well, should I do it? You do you, bro. Horrible idea, horrible advice. So please, judgment does not mean that we have free reins to go wherever you want to go. If someone at the center in your family beside you is trying to fix you, and if the source is the correct source, embrace it. Don't fight it. The first instinct we have is to come out flying, right? Whoa, don't back me in a corner, right? The moment that I speak about someone's responsibilities, they automatically think about what are my rights. Every single time, it never fails. The moment I talk to the husbands about being good to their wives, they wait and wait. When will Asabai talk about her being good to me? I won't. I'm talking about your responsibilities towards her. I'm not talking about the rights that she has over, or you have over her. I'm not. And they're not interdependent. I'm sorry, they're completely independent. You don't need to have your rights fulfilled for you to fulfill your responsibilities. You don't need to wait, let her do this to me, give me this, say this to me, and then I will be, no, your responsibilities are your responsibilities. You have to act a certain way in a collective society, and that's your responsibility. If others, for example, are not giving you the proper right, don't wait for that. You have to be the best version of you, the best version of you possible. That happens when there's a God-centric society. Don't wait for someone. No. So yes, sometimes I think that, because when I talk to other people on this side, like, look, we're just trying to help, and the problem is that we've become tone deaf. Not just to issues outside of us, to our own tone as well. And this is a generation that we live in right now, an era we live in, it's all about tone. It's all how you say it, man. It's not what you say sometimes. It's all how you say it. Our kids are frustrated, not at what the parents are saying, but how they're saying it. It's her tone, Molana. Yeah, she's right. I was wrong, but did she have to use that tone? And as much as I try to say, look, don't worry about the tone. Worry about what they're saying. After a while, tone is also very important. No smoking, don't smoke, don't you dare think about smoking. Thank you for not smoking. That's a different tone, same message. And it's more welcoming. So my third point now is the idea that, number one, we don't know everyone's journey. Number two, we don't have any right to assume that we know what's happening inside their heart. But number three, the one who now is being the victim, quote unquote, of the judgment, please, not everyone is out to get you. Not everyone is out to clip your wings. Not everyone is out to sit there and shove you in the corner. There actually are some people who want to see you grow, who want to point out things that I'm telling you, as your mother, as your father, as your husband, as your wife, as someone who is very near and dear to you. You're like a daughter to me, an auntie inside the center. I've seen you since you were this young, my son. I see you as I see my son. If that's the case, then this is what I think that you should do. I remember one time, true story, okay? I was the youth president in my community. Okay, we're talking about, I'm not going to age myself, but in the 90s, okay? When some of you probably weren't even born, my young guys, in the 90s. Sorry, I'm taking a little glass of water. In the 90s, I was a youth president. And I remember this conversation perfectly. And I wish I dealt with it properly back then. It's a silly, silly story, and I'm really sorry. At our center, at Al-Mahdi, program happening. It was a youth event that I had just emceed. Right? So I was emceeing, and afterwards it was a packed out house, a lot of adults, this and that. Afterwards, it was time for Maghrib. The Adhan was going on. I was outside talking to a few people just about the program, feedback, thank you very much for coming, blah, blah, blah. The Adhan was going on. Okay. This is now when I think I must have been, at that moment, probably in my teens. Okay? So pre-Hawza, of course. And an uncle comes to me after Salat. I prayed Salat, went inside, prayed Salat, after Salat. Comes to me, pulls me aside. He says that you're the president of the youth committee. I said, yes. He was during the Adhan, the only voice I could hear outside talking and laughing with people was your voice. If you want to be the president of this youth committee, you can't be doing that. Time for the Adhan, we always tell everybody, don't talk, come rush inside, it's a call for prayer, this and that. How can we expect a 9-year-old when his own president is out there, kissing babies, handing out flyers, shaking hands, thank you for coming. And my first reaction, I was 16, 17, and you guys don't know me, I was a very angry teenager. Holy smokes, right? I'm a soft, cuddly, beautiful person now, but before I was just like, so my BP is going up now, my rage is going up, I'm turning green, my shirt's ripping, right? And I said, okay, uncle, thank you for your feedback. That's exactly what I said to him, and I was curt with him, and I apologized. I apologized a year later. I was curt with him, okay? And I was off for 2 days. I didn't like being called out back then, right? A typical guy, right? We don't like this kind of thing. We get all sensitive, right? We get all like, we're very, very, Until my sister told me, he was right. I go, I know he was right. And what bothered me wasn't what he said. What bothered me was that he was right about my actions. And the insecurity that I had, that I shouldn't have done that, was confirmed by the person outside of me. All I heard was judgment. But I wasn't mad at him. I was mad at the fact that I let someone else see me in that. Right? But all I thought was, oh, he judged me, doesn't know me, who does he's not my father, he's not my father. But my sister would ground me and say, but he's right. And, so when I apologized to him several months later, I pulled him aside. I go, uncle, that moment, this and that. And he said to me, there were so many people out there with you. I told you because you're like my son. And you're the hope of this youth community right now. Right? So it doesn't always come from a bad place. Our first reaction is, who do you think you are? Like who are you? Mind your own business. And it goes to a me-centric, right? A me generation that no one can say boo to these guys because they think they're being attacked. No one's attacking them. But we have to also realize that we are dealing with a very me generation, and not in a bad way. That's just the reality of the situation. And to understand that, let's have a different approach. But the approach is not that there is wrong happening and I can't say anything. That's one approach. It's not the approach. That goes against the furu'idin. So we have to figure out how to say it. So there's direct ways and there's indirect ways to do it. Right? But we can't allow them to feel like they're judging. And yes, I have a certain box way. For example, okay? Like I was always raised to come to any program at the centers dressed a certain way. Okay? I've said this many times, and I remember my father, marhum, was very strict, and God bless him for that strictness, about how to dress in the center. Okay? When I see today's youth walk in with a hat on, with a hole in their jeans, with, will look like, some shirt they've been wearing all day, slept in it, worked in it, changed the oil in it, everything, and they come to the center, it boils my blood. But I don't know the backstory. I don't know the story. I don't know what he's coming looking for God, and I'm stuck on how he looks. It's important. I get it. It's important. But we don't know. We don't know. I'll tell you one more story, inshallah, to try to understand this point. And I'm sorry, I've made it a little bit of a emotional discussion tonight, and I apologize for that. But I've earned my stripes with all of you. I can say this to you, and hopefully you take it as something that's good. One more story, and then inshallah, Masai. There was a student in the Hawza in Najaf, a different student. Every single day he would go to the Hawza of Imam Ali. He would, with all the etiquettes, beautiful libas, smelling of ithr, doing wudu, facing the dhari a little bit, sending his salams, bowing down, reading the ziyat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and then he had a certain hajat, a khas hajat, a specific dua that he had, a specific request that he had from Imam Ali to fulfill, of course, to Allah. And every day now for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the story stay, every single day after Zohar, with all the proper etiquette, looked great, smelled great, all the proper respect, he would read the ziyat and ask that request. Read it and ask, read it and ask. One day, during his ziyarat, a man comes walking into the room where the dhari is, okay? He's unkept, he's disheveled, his libas is dirty, it's ripped, he himself looks like, nothing happens, there's no etiquette involved. He walks in, he goes, Salaam alaikum. He goes, and he walked in limping, okay? So disheveled now, hasn't combed his hair, there's a certain smell from him, he's limping, he has a leg problem. Salaam alaikum. Imam Ali, fix this leg, okay? I'll be back tomorrow. And he walks out. He's looking at this like, what just happened? What is this? He ignores it. ignores it. The next day, libas, itar, clothes, wudu, ziyarat, assalamu alaikum ya amir al-mu'mineen. The man from yesterday walks in. Today, no limp. No limp. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. And walks out. Now he's looking at the Zari like, come on, yaar. I've been standing here on this spot for 21 days straight asking you for a certain hajat. I've done all the requirements, all the respect. He comes walking in with utmost disrespect and speaks to you like this and walks away. I'm not condoning that. The books say that that night in his dream, his ustad came. Not Amir al-Mu'minin, his ustad came. Who passed away. He says that there are different levels of people. There are those levels of people that will ask Allah through the Ahlul Bayt, and if they're not granted their dua right away, that will not affect their aqidah in the Ahlul Bayt. Please follow me very carefully. Understand the story. Don't misunderstand the story. All of you have my number and my email address, my shoe size, my blood type. Please contact me. Okay? Don't talk behind my back in WhatsApp groups. Talk to me straight. I don't understand the story. The Ustad says to his Shagird and his student that, look, people are at different levels when it comes to Allah and the Ahlul Bayt. You were at a level where, mashallah, you have ma'rifat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You've been asking for 3 weeks and it wasn't your time to get your dua answered. But you kept asking. He that walked in was at a different level. The level was that if Ali didn't grant that dua through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would have left the deen with hopelessness. It was on the edge of a cliff. And because he fixed his leg now, he renewed his faith in him. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that the guy has been asking for 3 weeks, he gets punished. His batamizi, his disrespect gets rewarded. No, that's not the point of the story. The point is that people are at different levels. You don't know with which level they're entering the masjid. There are some of our youth who entered today's centers looking for some answer, man. Every door has closed on their face. They're down, they're rock bottom, they feel ugly, they feel deficient, they're guilty, they can't keep up with Allah's Sharia. They enter on a Thursday night, they enter on, let's say, 7th Muharram, looking for some answer from Husain's majlis, and they get what? Judgment calls. Why? Because their hair is a little bit ajib, maybe they don't have a black shirt, maybe it's light blue, for example, right? Maybe their nails are a little bit long, right? So an uncle comes, what are these girls' nails? Cut your nails. What is this? And in this tone, and he says to himself, I knew coming here was a bad idea. And goes back and searches for other doors now to enter. Or he comes in and people welcome him. Right? There's a cup of tea that's shared. No mention of his blue shirt, no mention of his long nails. And he had, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged to a certain group. Next day he'll come wearing black, showered, trimmed nails, and it begins. Part of our process for this idea of rebuilding the one nation is to remove the judgment from our communities and our families. Yes, help each person on their respective path towards Allah, but that's their respective path. They will go as fast or as slow as they need to go. And Allah will judge them based on their path, not on your path. What might be easy for you is hard for them. What might be hard for them is very easy for you. What might be easy for them is hard for you. We don't know what the duruni halat, the batin, the inner state is of the individual. And it's up to us now to welcome everybody into the center. The doors are open for anybody who wants to come for hope. And these are all Islamic concepts. To uphold these Islamic concepts, Imam Hussein gave a huge sacrifice. And that sacrifice sometimes was drastic. Young men, I can understand sacrificing your life for Imam Hussein. Older companions, I can understand Imam Hussein's mission, to sacrifice for that mission. What always gets to me is a 6-month-old Ali Asghar. I don't understand. It's a hard masayib to recite. When all the Bani Hashim have given their life, Imam Hussein realized that his 6-month-old Ali Asghar was thirsty. Reports say that he took him out to the Maidan of Karbala and appealed, not begged, just appealed with the enemy to come and give my son some water. I won't read the entire Shahadat. You have heard the riwayat and the waqiyah and the events. You know better than I do. Every year I read one portion of this. Nowhere in the books that I have read, and maybe I'm wrong, is that when Imam Hussein brought Ali Asghar out to the Maidan of Karbala, that Ali Asghar was screaming and crying. When a baby has been that thirsty for that long, they go through various stages to let the parents know that I'm thirsty. They'll whine, and then if the water doesn't come fast enough, they'll begin to scream at a very, very high pitch. And their arms will go and their legs will go, and Ali Asghar wasn't like that. Ali Asghar wasn't screaming and yelling and crying at all. He was still. The books say that he was still. And my Ustad one time had mentioned this idea in a Masai when I had attended the first Ashra in Qom in my first few years before Tabligh. He had said that when you take a fish out of water, the fish goes through various stages. At first, with the hope that maybe I'll go back into the water, it goes on its stomach, it goes on its back, it goes on its stomach, it goes on its back. It's very, very bechen, it moves around Allah. When the water is not given right away, it stops doing that. The tail moves left and right. And the mouth closes, the mouth opens and the mouth closes. Imam Hussein brings out Ali Asghar, he's still, but his mouth is opening, his mouth is closing, his mouth is opening, his mouth is closing. Imam Hussein now says, look, I'll put down my Ali Asghar on the plains of Karbala. You come and you give him water yourself. But when that didn't happen, he picks him back up. Now all these men are seeing a 6-month-old face, the mouth opening, the dried lips of a 6-month-old. They begin to cry. Chaos ensues in Umar bin Saad's army. At that moment now, this heinous crime occurs. You know, when Mukhtar arrested Hurmala, tell me about your role on the day of Ashura. Mukhtar, I shot 7 arrows, 4 of them hit and 3 missed. Tell me about the arrows that hit. He says the first arrow that hit was Abdullah, the son of Imam Hassan, when he came out on Asr Ashur to protect Hussein. The arrow that shot in his chest to kill him was my arrow. Tell me about the second arrow. The second arrow is the arrow I shot in the eye of Abul Fazl Abbas, that when he fell from the horse, he fell on the arrow. Tell me about the third arrow, Hurmala. He says, Mukhtar, that third arrow I dipped in poison and I shot at the chest of Imam Hussein, such that until Zainabiyah, Bibi Zainab says, I couldn't see anything. I just saw Bhaiya's legs go left, go right, go left, go right. That was from the poison of Hurmala's sword, arrow. Tell me about the fourth arrow. Mukhtar, Umar bin Saad says, Hurmala, we're losing control of our army. Quench the boy's thirst. I saw Hussein bring his 6-month-old. I took an arrow I used for animals. I shot it with such fierceness, it went through one side of Ali Asghar, came out the other side, pinned him to Imam Hussein's arms. My Mawla took the blood of Ali Asghar, attempted to take it up to the sky, because the sky says no, there will be Qiyamah of Ali Asghar's blood. At that moment the Zameen says no, Hussein, there'll be a zilzala, there'll be an earthquake. My Mawla took the blood of his Masoom 6-month-old and wiped it on his face. Now he has Ali Asghar lifeless in his arms. He has to go tell Rabab, Rabab, you asked me to give our son water, but instead he got an air in his throat. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajoon. 7 times, my Mola. How do I tell the mother of a 6-month-old about what happened? Finally, now he says, Rabab, come and help me bury my 6-month-old. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماطر حسين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Hussein, Ya Hussein. Asghar, hay Asghar, Asghar, hay Asghar, Asghar, hay Asghar, Asghar, hay Asghar, Asghar, hay Asghar. असगर हाय असगर था ये पानों का बयां किसको दूं अब लोरियां ढूंढती फिरती थी मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ था ये पानों का बयां किसको दूं अब लोरियां ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ तेरा झूला जल गया ऐ मेरे तृष्णा दहां ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ था ये बानों का बयां किसको दूं अब लोरियां ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ हाय वो नाजुक गला 3 दिन से खुश्क था हाय वो नाजुक गला 3 दिन से खुश्क था बढ़ के मौजे तीर ने वो इस कदर जख्मी किया तर हुई खून से जुबान ले सके ना हिचकिया ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ था ये बानों का बयां किसको दूं अब लोरियां ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ खूब भरा कुर्ता तेरा हाय वो भी छिल गया खूब भरा कुर्ता तेरा हाय वो भी छिल गया अब जीऊं किसके सहारे पास मेरे क्या रहा जिंदगी है रायगा उम्र भर होना ढूंढती हिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ था ये बानों का बयां किसको दूं अब लोरियां ढूंढती फिरती है मादर है मेरा असगर कहाँ खाली झूला देख कर ऐ मेरे नूरे नजर खाली झूला देख कर ऐ मेरे नूरे नजर आंख फरियादी है मेरी और रोता है जिगर सो गए हो तुम कहाँ चैन से माँ, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। था ये बानों का बयां, किसको दूं अब लोरियां, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। मैं मुसाफिर शाम की, खत्म हद आराम की, मैं मुसाफिर शाम की, खत्म हद आराम की, कैद होकर जा रही हूँ, दर्द है आलाम की, बन चुकी है रीस माँ, मैं कहाँ अब तुम कहाँ, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। था ये बानों का बयां, किसको दूं अब लोरियां, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। जाम अश्कों के पियो, आज की शब सो रहो, जाम अश्कों के पियो, आज की शब सो रहो, उम्र लग जाए हमारी, तुम यूं ही जीते रहो, तुम पे कुर्बान मेरी जान, ऐ करारे बेकसा, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। था ये बानों का बयां, किसको दूं अब लोरियां, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। मीर क्या रेहान क्या, जिसने ये नौहा सुना, मीर क्या रेहान क्या, जिसने ये नौहा सुना, अश्क आंखों से बहाकर उसने रो रो कर कहा, हाय वो असगर की माँ, उफ वो तेरा इम्तिहान, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। था ये बानों का बयां, किसको दूं अब लोरिया, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। तेरा झूला जल गया है मेरे तृष्णा दहां, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। तेरा झूला जल गया है मेरे तृष्णा दहां, ढूंढती फिरती है मादर, है मेरा असगर कहाँ, है मेरा असगर कहाँ। या हुसैन,
या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन, आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, सीने तुम्हें लगाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। तेरे झूले को सकीना रो रो के चूमती है, तुझे घर में ढूंढती है। तेरी मौत की खबर मैं कैसे उसे सुनाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। बेटा तुम्हारा कातिल मेरे सामने खड़ा है, जाने क्यों हंस रहा है। चादर भी लुट गई है, मुंह किस तरह छुपाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। लगता है माँ से असगर नाराज हो गया है, मकतल में सो गया है। ढूंढूं कहाँ मैं उसको और किस तरह जगाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। मेरी जान जा रही है ये सोच सोच असगर, इस फूल से गले पर ये तीर कैसे झेला, बहनों को क्या बताऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। नेज़े से गिर रहा है नन्हा सा सर तुम्हारा, दिल रोता है हमारा। मेरे हाथ तो बंधे हैं, सर किस तरह उठाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। झूले के साथ बेटा मेरे हाथ जल गए हैं, जालिम भी हंस रहे हैं। तेरी आखिरी निशानी किस तरह से बचाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। जब रात होगी रन में हो जाएगा अंधेरा, डरना नहीं है बेटा, दादी कहेंगी तुमसे, आ मैं तुझे सुलाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ। मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, सीने तुम्हें लगाऊं, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ, असगर मैं तेरी माँ हूँ। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन व आले मुहम्मद।
عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام، وجعلنا وإياكم من الطالبين بثاره مع وليه الإمام المهدي من آل محمد عليهم السلام. متوجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن الأمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك، السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك، السلام عليك وعلى الأئمة من ذريتك وبنيك. صلى الله عليك وعلى أخيك أبي الفضل العباس، وعلى أختك أم المصائب زينب، وعلى ولديك العليين الشهيدين، وعلى ابن أخيك القاسم ابن الحسن. صلى الله عليك وعلى المستشهدين بين يديك جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. سيدي يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك يا إمام زماننا هذا، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود، وثبت لي قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.